just for the record book, and so that I can, for once, do the job the way I'm supposed to. This is the 36th CALLERLAB convention, and we are in Kansas City, Missouri. Today is the 7th of April of 2009, and the session we are about to begin is called CPR for Square Dance Clubs. That does not mean mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. But we, and I am the moderator, Jim Mayo, and to my left is the panelist, Virgil Forbes. Forbes? No.
Forbes.
Forbes, yeah, I thought so.
Just like the magazine.
You looked at me like I had mentioned the wrong person. Just like the magazine. Is that your spare time activity?
Don't I wish.
Yeah. We're just commenting to ourselves that this is an overlapping session with one that was held in this same room for the last period, called Winning Ways. We hope that the CPR results in winning, but whatever it is, clearly we recognize that square dance clubs are certainly not thriving in the way they used to way back when. We've come to terms over a period of time with the reality that the world is a different place than it was back when square dancing was in its most thriving period, which from my long experience appears to be somewhere between 1960 and 1990. The decline, actually, in writing the history book that I wrote, I did a lot of research and convinced myself that we sort of hit a plateau somewhere in the 70s, late 70s, and that the actual peak, if you use the attendance at the National Convention, skipped 1976, which was a blowout phenomenon. But other than that, we have a very nice steady rise up until 1983, and then it starts down again. And that is, I think, a pretty fair representation of when things changed. It's also true if you look back from the perspective of my place in the world, that the changes in our society were well underway by then. And the book Bowling Alone has made it clear that the way we work together and interact with each other has changed over the years. That's had some impact on our activity. I have also come to understand, with considerable help from my wife, who is an ultimately social being, that she's persuaded me, because I'm not a social being. I've never been comfortable. The hardest job I have as a square dance caller is to get down off the stage and go around and shake hands with the people on the floor. I make myself do it because I understand that it's part of my job. And over time, I have understood that it is even fun. But it was not an easy transition for me. Joanne made it very clear, and she's so enthusiastic about it. She makes up for me in a lot of ways. But that realization in my life has also made me realize that the ultimate value in square dancing as we know it as a club activity, and traditional dancing is a different form of the same thing, also fun and wonderful, but it does not have what we find in clubs, which is solid, comfortable, rewarding sociability. The fact that we get along with people. I had a realization somewhere a decade or so ago that those club executive committee meetings, which in our area took place every month, half a dozen or 10 couples would get together and spend the whole evening planning the activities of the club. When we started running our own program, Joanne did all of that in a half an hour a week. But these people got together once a month to plan the club's activities. It dawned on me finally that the reason they got together was because they enjoyed each other's company. And they have fun doing that at square dances. They had just as much fun doing it at executive committee meetings, sometimes even complaining about it, the responsibility and the amount of work it involved. But did they ever stay home? Not in your life. It turns out that sociability is our primary product. And for square dance callers whose egos sometimes are expanded, it's sometimes very difficult to acknowledge that the reason they come there is not for you, it's for each other. One of the most telling stories from my whole calling experience was a club of mine that went on a banner raid. They went to retrieve the banner from another club 30 miles down the road. And I knew from observation that the caller they were going to dance to was about as bad a caller as I have ever encountered. I mean, he was not good. And they came back. I went the next Monday night. It was a Monday night club. And they came smiling in through the door. I said, gee, how'd it go Saturday? Oh, we had a wonderful time. What a great banner raid. Oh, what a great... excuse me? I had real trouble understanding how this could be. I said, well, gee, did the caller do a good job? Oh, no, he was terrible. But we went back to the president's house for an after party afterwards, and we had more fun talking about how bad he was. And it began to register with me that I was not the reason those people had a good time square dancing. The reason they have a good time square dancing is because it provides them with a way to get together. And if there is one message I would urge us to take home from today, from this convention and from all of our discussions, it is the importance of togetherness and social interaction to the success of our venture. I believe that we have gotten excessively carried away with the technology and mechanics of square dancing. We never did acknowledge publicly the value of sociability. We have said that square dancing offers three primary values. One of them is the puzzle, the joy of solving the choreographic puzzle. Another one is the physical exercise and the mental exercise of our activity. It keeps us healthy, and it's a good thing. And then there is sociability. And it's always sort of been treated like an afterthought. I have come to realize over an extended period of time that it's not the afterthought, it's the product. The rest of it is a means to it. I'm declaring my position, and as we continue through this session, we will welcome your input on this and any thoughts that you might have. But I'd like to now turn the process over to Virgil, who has some thoughts about the technical end of how we organize, how we structure, and what we might do. Hopefully, Virgil will mention along the way how it facilitates the sociability aspect of the activity as well. And so, with no further ado, Virgil, you're on.
Thank you, Jim. Just in background, there is a handout here. If anybody has their computers, I have the handout on flash drives. You can download direct. Just for background, I'm a caller in an American metro area, Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. I have called in rural areas. I have called overseas. I've seen a whole bunch of things. I'm with Jim. We're selling sociability. But to a certain degree, callers have a responsibility to take care of the technical side to facilitate that socialization process, if you would. Right now, in the American metro areas, square dancing is in trouble. There are clubs that should be and probably need to be on life support. That's where the title of this CPR for clubs came from. What I have is not a final solution. What I have is not something to restore permanent health to your square dance clubs. It's just a way to jumpstart the healing process. No silver bullets, folks. Building clubs, maintaining clubs is hard work. It needs lots of different inputs, lots of different ways to help bring people together to have a good time. Okay, that's the bottom line. I can see in Metro America the club-based square dancing that we have cherished for 40 years dying out. If that makes me a gloom and doom type, I'm sorry. Square dancing will survive, but it may not survive in this way that we are used to it. I don't want that to happen. I want to get a 50-year pin as a caller, just like this young fella to my right here. To do that, I need 20 more years. Okay, so that's where I'm going. I want to keep my clubs that I have now alive and healthy. One of them almost died 3 years ago. We were down to 5 or 6 couples. So I came up with, I took ideas from about a dozen different places, put them together and said, let's try this. And this that I decided to try is a thing called ALPS, the Accelerated Learning Program for Squares. Okay, realization. Families in America have limited recreation time. And most of their recreation time, in their minds, is the weekend, Friday night through Sunday afternoon. That's when they think they have a chance to go out and have a good time. Second realization in the American society, Americans are impatient for results. They don't want to serve an apprenticeship before becoming a member of a group. And if you look at it, the way we have structured class for the last 30 years anyway, 24, 30, 32, 34 weeks of apprenticeship in class before they can join the square dance club, the group where they're going to have fun. Americans are too impatient for that. The whole society now is built around impatience. We want it, and we want it now. Okay, so that's the place that I started from. Okay, does your club need to be on life support? Well, answer me a question, at least in your own mind. Have you run a beginner's class in the last 3 years? Have your total graduates in the last 3 years come anywhere close as a graduation number to the number of active members you have in your club? Because we all know, life cycle of a square dancer, there are very few who go through class and then last for more than 3 years as club members. Okay, so if you're going to maintain your club every 3 years, you need to graduate about as many people as are active in your club. Okay? Well, no, I won't say hard numbers. That's my observation. Call it an opinion if you would, but I think it holds up most places. If you're having problems getting officers in your club, if your current president is on their 3rd or 4th year, you're in trouble. Okay, so decide, do you need this program, this thing called ALPS? Now, let me go one step farther. Most of us belong to clubs, call for clubs that are part of a federation of some kind, an association. The same thing can be said for those federations. Are there fewer clubs now? Are we recycling our federation officers? Same thing. Federations do a lot of work. They need healthy clubs to do the work. They sponsor festivals. If you don't have a healthy federation, you won't have a festival, and for that matter, we won't have federations to put together, bid, and host national square dance conventions. Hey, I'm a Vietnam vet. We all know about the domino theory. Well, this is the domino theory for square dance, and it all starts with beginner classes. Okay. I'm not going to talk at length. There are alternatives. The community dance program, the ABC program. If our clubs fall apart, that's where square dancing is going. Is what will keep square dancing alive. But those programs are almost invisible because our existing dancer base has never bought into them. Our existing dancers, many of them, are enthused with the long vocabulary of the Mainstream and Plus and other programs. They want to dance a whole night without ever repeating a sequence. That is not ABC. That's not community dance. It's like they're two totally different programs. And callers are not innocent in this. Callers are enthused with the large vocabulary of the more complex programs. Take it if you will. Okay, let's talk about ALPS, the Accelerated Learning Program for Squares. It doesn't shorten your teach time. What it does is front loads your teaching time. It is a concentrated weekend, 2.5 hours on Friday, 8 hours on Saturday, 4 2-hour sessions. Okay? That's kind of like what we did or what Jim did 30, 40 years ago. They had 4, 5, 6 week class? Okay? That taught what we called then the sets in order basic 50 or maybe extended 75. Oh no, you called before sets in order. Okay? We won't say anything.
In the 6 weeks, 20 lessons. My first class was 6 weeks, and we had 20 calls. I had taught everything I knew about square dancing in the first 5 weeks, and the 6th week was review.
Okay. I don't teach everything I know in that first weekend, but in that 4 sessions of teaching, I get the equivalent of what I would normally teach in 8 to 10 weeks of beginner class, the first 8 to 10 weeks. How do I get it so concentrated? I'm not reviewing. There's no learning decay. And frankly, I just pile it on until their eyes glaze over. Is that a good program? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not convinced either way. But the idea is get them enough vocabulary that they can join the club without the members of the club revolting over dancing too low a level every Friday night. Okay? I'm trying to meld our beginners into club members almost immediately. Oh, it's a tough program. Okay, your club has got to support it, gang. Square dance, as we know it, is about our clubs and our club dancers. That's what makes square dance run, not callers. If your club doesn't support it, it's not gonna work. That's number one. Number two, your club has got to dance every week. If you're a once-a-month club or a twice-a-month club, ALPS is not going to fold into your existing program very well. It's got to be a weekend, Friday, Saturday, maybe Sunday afternoon. Today's Americans, 2-income families in the metro America, a 2-hour commute every day, round trip or more. They don't want to be out till 9:30 or 10 o'clock on a weeknight when they got to get up at 4:30 or 5 the next morning. Okay? So I do it on Friday night. So far, it works well. Okay? The big drawback is your dancers of your club have to agree. Friday night is going to be less than mainstream probably until about Christmas time. The stuff that I don't teach that weekend, and that weekend I get up pretty close to the basic program. From there till Christmas, third tip of the night is workshop. That's when I bring in the rest of the calls that I haven't taught. On the handout on the next to last page, there's a teaching sequence that I used this year. I'll talk about that again in a minute. Okay, so that's the shorthand for ALPS. I'm running through the script here and skipping over about 3/4 of what I wrote. That works. How does the club need to support it? Number one, they got to publicize it. How many of you have clubs where the class is run by you and the club vice president and maybe another couple, we'll call them class coordinators, and those three plus you do 90% of the work of the class, recruiting and training. If this is going to work, everybody has to help. Okay? Even if it's only going out and putting up 2 or 3 flyers in the local grocery store or laundromat, or making sure that the stack of flyers in the library is renewed every week. Okay? Everybody's got to do something. I knew I forgot something. I left something in the car. Publicity. Newspapers? Yeah. Weeklies are better than dailies. Weeklies have more room for this kind of community interest. Jim's got a couple here from Sturbridge, some real good stories. I have the same kind of thing from some of the Chesapeake Day weeklies. Stories, not just community calendar, stories talking about the fun of square dance. And if we don't talk about the fun, people aren't going to think it's recreation. They aren't coming. The biggest heartache of ALPS working up to the weekend is figuring, how are we going to feed these people? For that matter, how many are we going to feed? Because Saturday, it's a morning session, 2 afternoon sessions, and an evening session. Once they come in the door Saturday morning, I'm not letting them out. We're going to feed them lunch, Safeway cold cut platters, the 5-foot-long Subway sandwiches, take your pick, and a club potluck for Saturday evening. And, hey, we're square dancers. You know that if we throw a potluck, there's going to be a good food. Okay? Okay, that's the biggest headache to it. Okay. Publicity. Let's talk a little more about publicity. There's no one thing that works. There's about 95 things that different clubs have tried. Use as many of them as you can. One of the club members got the idea, and I went to the 33rd Foundation and got some money. We bought some roadside signs like politicians use, 20-inch by 30-inch, put them on a wire frame and stick them along the roadside. They cost about $8 a piece if you buy 50. So we spent a little over $400. It got some awareness. We got some phone calls. We also lost a bunch of signs because on Monday morning the road crews came along and picked up all the excess signs. Okay? So one of the things your club members have got to do, each of them's got to adopt 2 roadside signs, put them up on Friday afternoon, pick them up Sunday night so you don't lose them. You only need them for about 3 weekends. Anything you do earlier than 3 weeks is awareness. It's not recruiting. Okay, so the hard recruiting, the newspapers, the flyers, the roadside signs is in the last 2 to 3 weeks before the class. All the other demos you do, that's fine. That's community awareness. Awareness is good, but it's not recruiting until the last 2 or 3 weeks before class. I have one of my club members, he got big on computer-generated iron-on transfers. He made up a shirt. On the back of it said, "Square Dance for Fun. Ask me how." And then he carried little quarter-page flyers in his pocket. He wore those shirts all summer long and recruited over a square all by himself. Flyers, yes. Church programs, yes. Everything that you've ever done, put it all together, big publicity blitz all at once. The new song and dance routine from CALLERLAB, one of the finest things they ever did. The only problem is they're a little expensive. Not terrible, but a little. Okay? There's room on the back to put your club name, your club contact numbers, your club schedule. Lots of room. Use everything you can use. Flyers. One design isn't enough. One size does not fill all. You put flyers in the library and the rec centers talking about recreation. You do up a flyer talking about family values and good family activity and put those in the church bulletins. You do up a flyer talking about the fitness of square dance. You put those in the doctor's office or the weight training center. Okay? One message does not fit all. We have several messages in square dance. Let's tailor our message to the group we're targeting. Okay? No one avenue is going to bring you so much as a single square. A couple or two. If you get lots of strings in your bow, you get lots of chances to get one or two couples from each approach. Get enough approaches, you got a pretty good sized class. Okay, so that's kind of the idea. If you do square dance parties are a lot of fun. I love calling them. They aren't recruiting. They're awareness. But if you put them in that last month before class starts, they're recruiting. Just take the flyers along. Which flyer? I don't know. If it's a yacht club, you take recreation. If it's a church youth group, you take the family values flyer. Okay? Whatever you're doing, make it happen. I've made a deal with my club this year. They schedule first night parties with their block party, their community association, their church. I'll do them cheap, barely more than expenses. But that last 2 weeks, 3 weeks before class, I want to do a whole bunch of parties, not demos, parties. Demos are awareness. Parties just before class are recruiting. Get that fixed in your mind. There's awareness, there's recruiting. The two are not the same. I haven't had a lot of luck with radio stations. There's a couple of country western stations. All we get from them is a listing in the community calendar. That's not bad. It's not as good as it could be. One of these days I want to get a 5 or 10 minute interview on the air with them. Haven't been successful thus far. Pardon? Country western, by and large, does not do phone-in radio. It's not talk radio. Okay, you got to work the right format. Yeah, he says, call in on the air, catch them unaware. Well, maybe that works. I've never tried that. Let me think about that. I'm willing to think about anything. Okay, that's the basic plan of ALPS. Several recruiting suggestions in the handout, several publicity suggestions in the handout. My teaching order is in the handout, next to last page. And if you are a teacher of square dance, you're going to look at it and say, he can't do that. You're right, it's a challenge. You have to really work to figure out what is the most effective way to teach. Get in enough repetitions, but not too many repetitions. Do not end every sequence with an allemande left, right, and left grand promenade. Yeah, you need to do that several times, but you don't need to do it 10 times in every 20-minute tip. Okay? Just enough repetition. How much is just enough? You're going to have to judge that by how they're dancing. Okay, and this takes it all the way through the 12th week of workshop to get to the end of the mainstream program. Why the order that I've picked? I actually recorded myself calling mainstream dances and did a frequency count. What were the things that I called most? And what were the things that I called in my singing calls? New dancers love singing calls. New dancers love singing with singing calls. Hey, guess what? That's how I write my music program. I've got a gospel medley that especially the churchgoers just love. I use it at square dance parties at churches. They didn't believe you could turn gospel music into square dance music. They love it. Okay? aim your music at your audience. Make it stuff they can sing along. It puts a smile on their face. It's fun. That's what we're selling, right? We're selling fun. Okay? Any experienced caller has their favorite list. The specific order you teach in, secondary issue, tertiary issue. You're teaching fun. The choreography is just a way to get at it. Okay? So use your own teaching sequence. Use this one. Do a frequency analysis of your own calling. What do you call the most? That's what you front load. Okay. That is about 10 minutes on Alps. It is not for everyone. Our very well established dancers, the dancers who have been our dance leaders for 10, 20, in some cases 30 years, and we've abused their leadership skills for most of that time. They aren't the people to recruit new dancers. They've been through every one of their friends, every one of their families, every one of their coworkers. Those aren't your recruiters. You need to use your newest dancers as your recruiters. I'll just leave it at that. Okay? I could talk for another hour. My partner Peggy Lee over here knows that. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Virgil. I just realized I may not have mentioned when I introduced the session that I'm Jim Mayo, but I am. And I offer Virgil's method as one of the things we might try in looking for a way to reestablish the clubs that we all learn to love in becoming square dancers. We all come for different reasons, and I am personally of the view that the Square Dance Club was a wonderful thing. Unfortunately, it's, as we say, in need of CPR, because somewhere along the line, we got down the wrong path. And whatever we're doing now isn't working as well for us as it once did and as we wish it would in the future. So my answer to that is let's look for something we can change. Unfortunately, I'm finding a huge resistance to change. Everywhere I look, everybody says, well, yeah, but I don't want those people in my group. Let somebody else teach them until they're good enough to dance with us. Make them acceptable in one weekend so that we don't have to put up with beginners in our club. I don't think that attitude fails to register with the people we're trying to recruit. I'm going to describe my favorite group, which is on the CALLERLAB Winning Ways set. We mentioned it this morning in the Winning Ways session. The Sage Swingers in Brunswick, Maine, decided 10 years ago. They had a couple of strong couples who decided they were going to redo this dying club. And it was on its last legs. They could barely turn out a square for a dance. And two strong couples took over and reformed the club. They live in an area where plus is the only way clubs dance. They made it a mainstream club. They changed the focus of the club so that their primary objective was to make it welcoming for new dancers. And they ignored the area in which they were dancing. They did push very hard on the local clubs to run an occasional mainstream dance so that they could go visit. They now go visit with 2 busloads. They are 10 years into this program. They dance regular 8 to 10 squares on their weekday dances, and their once a month Saturday weekend dances run 12 squares or more. They just graduated 16 couples. They run 2 classes a year, and they're now 10 years down the road on this program. None of the clubs within 100 miles of them have chosen to try that same approach. They are all still dancing 3-4 squares if they're lucky on their weekend dances. They do run now, quite willingly, they'll run a mainstream dance so that this club can come with their 2 busloads. But they do that only once in a while. They won't change their program. I'm convinced that it's going to take a change of attitude somewhere along the line, and this club demonstrates that a change of attitude will work. As I was blowing off about this at my Callers Association meeting a couple of weeks ago, Paul Cote, who's a member of Tri-State Callers Association, said, well, he said, it's not just the program. He said, down in Houston, there's a group called the Lob Lollies, and they run very happily. So I called their caller, Bob Baer, and as I was driving out here, he called and returned my call, and sure enough, they have 140 couples, members. They pay $200 a year for their membership, and they graduate a 4 or 5 square class every year. Bob says, I run it with an iron fist, because if they're going to be part of this group, they're going to go recruit. They are going to bring me, not send me, bring me new dancers every year. That's part of their responsibility. That's what they get as a reward for paying their $200. He works on salary from the club, and they hire traveling callers every other week for their program. With 140 times 200, you can afford some of these luxuries. Hugely successful club, runs with the CALLERLAB Plus program. It can be done in lots of different ways. The common factor is strong leadership. I think that many times today's callers, years ago when I went to Ed Gilmore's caller school, he said, what you have to do is find some people and do what you have to do to get them. And he didn't care what that was. You find some people and you call whatever will let you get them to dance with you. Somewhere along the line, there were so many clubs around that every town had one, and a new caller didn't have any place to start. Callers came out of caller school, and they waited to be hired by an existing club. One of the things that we might do as CPR for our clubs is to take back leadership and accept the fact that it is the caller's job to find some people and do what you have to do to get them dancing. And I don't see any strong reason not to start a new group. Perhaps it's strong to say it, but I think we, in the existing modern square dance activity, appear to be so set in our ways that a change of attitude is very hard to come by. Clearly it's possible. The state swingers demonstrate that. But I'm beginning to see that it would be a whole lot easier for a caller, new or otherwise, to go find some people and introduce them to dancing slowly. Don't try to make them learn fast enough so that they can join in the existing group. I don't think the existing groups that I have seen are willing to be patient enough to make it possible to teach these people comfortably. We are always going to be pushing them beyond a reasonable pace if we try to get them to a stage where an existing group will accept them in any reasonable time. Strong words. The message I come up with is that leadership is essential, that focus on the new people is essential, and back to where I started, the most important product that we're selling is that people should enjoy each other's company and have a good time together, sociability. We would like to open this session up to suggestions because we don't pretend for one instant that we have all the answers. It's pretty clear that hardly anybody has all the answers or even any successful answers. If any of you have any ideas that you'd like to contribute, Virgil's going to run around to the microphone after he has his own brief observation, I suspect.
I will do so. Some of you are sitting there thinking, well, Jim and Virgil are coming at it from different sides, and perhaps we are. I'm trying to meld into an existing program, and Jim is talking about establishing new programs like we did 30, 40 years ago. it's to the
Start
same
over.
end, starting over. Jim and I really are not in disagreement. It may sound like it a little. I want to say one thing about callers. The vast majority of callers at this convention, how many of them are over 60? New leadership, new blood, new excitement means newer, younger callers. Every caller who's over 60 needs to find and develop a new caller for his area, her area, whichever. We need newer, younger leadership. And if the callers are going to be the leaders of the community, that means we have to actively go out and recruit new leaders.
Half of the callers in my Callers Association, Tri-State, are under 60.
Not in our area. I was counting the other day. Central Maryland has about 15 callers, and 11 of us are within 10 years of one another in terms of age, 50 to 60.
We got a bunch of those too, but we've also got some young guys.
Okay.
Looking for suggestions. Be sure you, for the recording, identify yourself and where you come
Peg from Kansas. And you were talking about these various ways to publicize, like church bulletins and rec commissions and anything. I'm wondering about ages to target, and what ages do these various types of publicity yield? Have you experienced?
Different groups have different ideas. There are square dance groups out there that are adults only. All of my clubs are family clubs. I will teach willingly down to age 10. I will go below that for established square dance families. The big thing with those who are under 10 or 11 is attention span. And frankly, the teenagers learn so quick they get bored with their parents and their slow learning style. Okay? But your club has got to decide, or you can input. I love teaching kids in with the adult classes, but that's just me.
The group in Sturbridge that he mentioned that was the subject of this newspaper article has reformed themselves in the last couple of years, or 3-4 years, into a family club. And they have a hall that the club built 40, 50 years ago. Very nice hall. They have indeed graduated a class recently, 16 people, I think. I called for them a couple of weeks ago. And of the 16 people, 12 of them were at the dance that I called. It was the first dance after the graduation. 3 of those were under 12. 3 of those people were under 12 there with their mother. Dad was there too, but he had not joined the class because he was going poo. He's going to be in the next class, and was quite enthusiastic about it. That group also has a 15-year-old caller who called a tip at my dance at the request of the club, and is coming along just fine. He's doing great. His father or his grandparents drive him to the dance because he doesn't have a license yet. He's been calling for a couple of years. It is happening. There are places where it can go on, but they too have a different attitude than many of the clubs that have gotten settled in their ways, is the kindest way I can put it. I think we have an absolutely wonderful recreation. The thing that I've said over and over and over again is that it is infinitely variable. We can make it whatever we want it to be. I wish we could avoid getting stuck in the form it has become. This is not what it was 40 years ago. 40 years ago, we did the fewer calls that we had in much greater variety. We moved with much greater smoothness. We paid a lot more attention to the music. We had a much better dancing experience than we have today. As I watch today, I see stop, go, stop, go. We don't dance. We execute figures. That's another factor that can bear on it. You aren't going to reform any group of modern square dancers today into great smooth dancers in any short-term period. But it turns out if you offer it to them, they do like it. They complain that it's fast, but they like it. And So that's another way that we might go. We keep talking about don't make it boring, don't do the same thing over and over again. I frankly think that's way overplayed. If you allow people to move with the music in the company of their friends, and once you set them in motion, keep them in motion, moving smoothly, it doesn't have to be complicated. They forget about what the choreography is. Again, a side trip, doing a workshop with a Callers Association, I got them up and I danced them through a sequence, and I stopped them and said, can any of you remember that sequence? It was, half a dozen calls. And most of them could repeat it back to me. I then called a sequence and did another sequence and asked any of them if they could remember the previous sequence, the first one. None of them could. They couldn't even get started on it. The second sequence totally obliterates the one you just did. And you can make them remember if you repeat it a half a dozen times. But worrying about people getting bored but doing the same thing over and over again is foolish. They don't remember it.
Perfect example, just by accident, because I was relatively new on the computer. It was the first time. I have several singing calls that I also use for patter music. And just by mistake, I used the same music for patter and singer. Nobody noticed. Because they just realized there was music and they were dancing. A caller might have noticed, but the dancers don't. The dancers, short-term memory, we're having a good time. That's all that matters. Okay. By the way, lest you think I am strictly into the teaching, one of my favorite things, and I mentioned it earlier today in a different session, I had a group at a Baptist church. They called me. They wanted to have a foot fellowship. I guess Baptists don't dance. I don't know, but they wanted to have a fellowship with squares. Okay. And they took every Sunday after service, they checked out all the couples and who was available on Thursday night, and if they were going to have at least a square, they called me and said, come on down Thursday night, let's dance. And it wasn't an every week or a regular schedule, just when they could get a square. And I guess I did 10 or 12 of these across 5 or 6 months. And we had a great time. And eventually something came up and the church got into something else. I haven't done it for 2 or 3 months. But we had a good time. And the choreography was strictly what you would think of as being first night stuff. A lot of circles, a lot of stars. I did manage to get them into a grand square a couple of times. Ladies chain, but no right and left through. Lead to the right, veer to the left, circulate, because I like circulates and it's wind in your face kind of choreography. No square throughs, no circle to a line. Bend the line, pass through, bend the line, pass through, face your partner, pass through, Alaman left your corner. It works.
10 calls in one night. Good. Excuse me. Hey, do we have any further input? Any thoughts? Any arguments? Maybe you don't agree with me. A little challenge is good.
If you don't talk, Jim and I both have more material.
Dave Myers from Wichita, Kansas. My little Tuesday night group I started originally as a workshop, and this worked out pretty good until I lost my building not too long ago. But what we were doing, I was doing workshops, which developed into a club, which is developed to, on a Tuesday night, we do a tip of basic main lesson, a mainstream tip, a plus tip, a line dance, and just a lot of fun. And this has just slowly grown from one square to, at one point, we had 5 squares going.
You started this group?
I started this group.
Okay.
It was something different. Part of it was workshop. Another club had the Alps type grouping, and they needed somebody to workshop this. I said, well, let's start this. And it's kept those people active in there and whatnot. And they like the idea. I just got to get a different location because the part of town I'm in now is kind of poor town. They don't like that part. But otherwise, it's going good.
But that's an example of what I was urging before, is find some people and do what you have to do to get them. Maybe they come out of an existing square dance program somewhere, but we as callers have to accept more responsibility. Don't stand around and wait to be hired and then do what the club tells you to do, because they may be very set in their ways, and they are not going to be very tolerant of any new approach you might try. You don't have to use existing dancers, but some of those dancers are going to go away anyway if the club doesn't provide what they want. If you are trying a new program, the more variety we have to offer in our programs, the wider the appeal that our activity can have. And I keep going back to our activity is infinitely variable. We can make it anything it needs to be. It can serve the most complicated-minded people. It can also serve those who don't want it complicated. It's only our mindset that keeps us from utilizing that potential for variety.
I have had some success with one of my group in recruiting dancers who've dropped out and come back. And almost without fail, the reason they dropped out, and they were good dancers, was they were tired of chasing the list of choreography. And some of them, I've got a Wednesday night group. I won't call it a seniors group. It's in a mature, active adult community. You know, the kind where you got to be 55 or 60 to move in.
And have $300,000 to buy in.
A little less at this one, but but the same concept. And most of them come back, and they don't want to chase choreography. It's a perfect club. They come down on Wednesday night, eat a little, talk a little, dance a little, talk a little more. They have a good time. There is a subset of them that dance plus. There's almost one square of them that dance advanced. Most of them dance a little less than mainstream, and they don't know it. And they don't care. Okay? They have talked to me about doing an alternative kind of class for them this year because they're losing a lot of potential new dancers to those who want to go south during the winter. I think the technical term is snowbird. Okay? So they want to have 4 Saturdays in a row and see how much I can teach in 4 Saturdays to have new club members before they fly south for the winter. Okay, I don't know if it's going to work. I kind of have this vague worry that I will hit teaching saturation far too soon any given day. But there are a couple of couples in the club that are very strong leaders, and as long as they're providing leadership, I'll go along with them. For a number of years, it was virtually a caller-run club, not officially, but virtually. Okay? They are a lot of fun. We've got some good dancers. We've got some people who, frankly, early onset Alzheimer's. When they're on the floor, I don't call anything more complex than a star by the left, turn your partner right, Allemande left, because that's about all that individual can handle. Okay? And the club has said, when these people with these problems get up, call what they can dance, let them dance a tip or two, and that's fine. Okay? Again, it's, why are they there? They're there to see their friends and, maybe dance a little too. So every group is a little different. If you have strong dancer leadership, let them lead. If they don't, you're the leader. You better do something.
Any more suggestions, input, discussion? We have some. Yes, indeedy.
My name is Janet from Colorado, and we have a group that we took over 3 years ago with 1 square, and the group was dying. We did a little bit of advertising, and my husband is the caller. He calls strictly to the floor, whatever level they happen to be dancing. And we have grown that group from 1 square to 7 or 8 squares every single Tuesday night. We don't charge for the dance. We have a donation jar. We have a cure. So the donations are split between the caller and the cure. We get our location for free because we are the entertainment for a restaurant. So we have lots of exposure to the public. And we make sure that we invite the public to come and dance with us, at least 1 tip. And if there's a lot of little kids in the restaurant that night, we do the ducky dance as much as everybody hates it. Those kids and their parents and our dancers are on the floor. And we have a great group. When we are done with the dance, we go down the road to Wendy's, and we invite everybody to come with us because square dancing is a social activity also besides just a dancing activity. And it's still growing. Our biggest fear now is outgrowing the restaurant.
Is that Dylan? No, the place.
Oh, no, it's called White Fence Farm.
White Fence Farm. In Denver, downtown Denver. How about that? Great. Any other comments, suggestions, ways you've helped your club survive?
Somebody just asked in the back of my ear what kind of results I've had with my Alps down in southern Maryland.
Good question. 6
couples have grown to a club roster officially of just over 70. Of course, you know about club rosters, right? Okay. We actually have about 6 to 7 squares of active membership, which means any given Friday night I've got 4 to 5 squares on the floor, which is a lot more than the 5 and 6 couples that I had 3 years ago.
CPR seems to be working.
But it's not the final solution. We got to find something more than just CPR.
The conclusion I make from all of this is the biggest tool we need is an open mind. There's no rule that says we have to go to the end. If we've said all that you have to say, if you've run out.
I never run out, but I think I've said enough.
Yeah, perfectly acceptable alternative. Any further input? Hold on just a second. You have to be recorded, and you have to tell us who you are.
My name is Elaine Peacock from South Dakota, and my question is, we're in rural communities, you know, where we don't have a lot of draw from the bigger towns like some.
Be grateful.
Be grateful.
Absolutely.
But I mean, the population
you don't have the competition from
but we don't have the population either to draw from. We're in a Siouxland community.
How many people go to church on Sunday?
A lot.
How many? Yeah, okay. So the town has plenty of people.
Okay.
All you need to do is find out how to reach your share of them.
Okay.
And I think we sometimes get defeatist about it. That we think because there are only, maybe 2,000 people to draw from. I'd be really happy with 10% of that in my group.
And
really happy.
As geographically separated as you are, you aren't going to have the pressure from other groups to progress farther into the vocabulary than you find comfortable. The biggest problem in metro areas was the rush to plus, and it was very much a peer group pressure kind of thing. Yes, aided and abetted by the callers. But, so you've got a lovely situation where you can call what you want to call and they'll have a good time.
Yeah. Well, but still you don't have as imposing a surround of competition. And
Susan Morris from Washington. In our area, the issue is that the clubs, there's the rush not to plus, but rush to become a mainstream club dancer. And starting a program like this would be great, and I see a potential for that, but not completing the full mainstream. Our clubs have guest callers, and to get with the guest callers and say, oh, they only know to this, and would you workshop that, seems to be a potential problem, because the guest callers are only through there once a year.
Absolutely. Those people shouldn't go to guest callers. And I think that we are pushing very hard to move everybody into the same mold. If we have a group that doesn't dance what the area dances, we have a mainstream club that doesn't dance the plus, as I say, swingers do. So they don't go to other dances unless that club says, tonight we're going to make it suitable for your people. So they stay home. And they're now big enough and powerful enough so that the clubs are willing to change their program. And if you had a group like that and went to the club that was hiring a guest caller, I bet they'd tell him what calls to use. If you could bring them a couple of busloads of people, it's amazing how powerful that message is.
I will just mention, traditionally for my Alps class that starts in September, in November they get a guest caller, Bill Harrison, who actually lives closer to the club than I do, and he looks forward to working with that less than mainstream vocabulary, and he has a lot of fun with them. Just because somebody's a big name caller doesn't mean they aren't there for the fun just like the rest. And I think most callers, as guest callers, would look forward to the opportunity to work with a whole bunch of new enthusiastic dancers. It's fun. Okay, the problem, and I speak to it in the handout, is that if you rely very much on guest callers, you've got no continuity. An occasional guest caller is fine, but you can't march them through a whole series of guest callers.
Okay, any other comments? Comments? One more. Got to keep Virgil on the run.
Rex wouldn't ask. This is Peg from Kansas again. A little bit of input from you, experienced teachers, on graduation requirements. I'm teaching a class, and I have sporadic attendance from some of the newer, inexperienced dancers, and in discussing with our club president about graduation coming up, I said, I don't know if we'll have any graduates. And she said, oh, we always graduate everybody. One time, she said, there was someone we talked to. Your comments, please.
I think graduation is way too late to deal with the fact that somebody is not suited to be a square dancer. It's a controversial subject that lots of people have rambled about, but I have over the years sent several people to other activities. If I haven't done it by the fourth week, shame on me. You can tell very quickly whether somebody is likely to make it as a square dancer in whatever group you have.
One of the things I say up front is regular attendance is required.
To not graduate somebody who's been through a whole class with you, I think is a serious mistake. Oh, did I misunderstand?
I don't call it a whole class if they come half the time. But I was told that we graduate them even if they missed out on so much, and you have to repeat so much, and you can't cover the material, to my way of thinking, to graduate them. But I was told that we graduate them anyhow.
I do not like to let a club get that powerful so that they tell me whether to graduate somebody. On the other hand, I do think it's my responsibility to say to somebody who is attending only half the time, I'm terribly sorry, but we can't have you continue in the group. And you need to do that when they start not making it. After they've missed the third or fourth night, it's time to say, gee, this program requires more regular attendance. And if you can't make it, why don't you rearrange your schedule and come back next year? The ones I have removed from the class have been people who were truly not suited. And I used to say, I can teach anybody to square dance. And then I watched two couples drive out 6 squares because they didn't want to dance with them. They were so obnoxious that the 6 squares were not willing to continue in square dancing because they didn't want to be in squares with those people. And I said to myself, that's never going to happen again. So I have over the years had people that I advised, and I've accepted the responsibility. I've asked the club's permission because I'm hired by them. But I've said, I will talk to them, but I need you to accept the fact that I'm going to. And then I have told these people that square dancing is not for you. Try bowling or whatever else turns you on, but we can't have you continue in this group. You try to be as nice about it as you can, and sometimes they say thank you and run away happy. Sometimes they get angry as can be. But I think the price of giving up or driving out the rest of the class is way too high a price to pay.
100% concurrence.
This may not be the subject. Actually, this may be the subject of CPR for clubs, because these are factors that you deal with, and it can have a real impact on the survival of the group.
I'm Lynn Strobel from Miles City, Montana, and just listening here.
Love that town.
I think what you've hit on a lot today is kind of what faces me. I'm in an area where our nearest neighboring club is 150 miles away. And, we've danced for 30 years and I've called for 30 years. And it's always been our dream, to get everybody so they can dance the mainstream program, so they can go anywhere and dance. our club, I cannot get anybody out of town. So I've come to realize that the program we do in Miles City is Miles City's program.
Absolutely.
And I think as soon as I accept that fact, which I've come to realize after the last few years, that we'll have much more success than trying to get people to conform. Granted, at some point, you'd like to have them at the spot where they know all the mainstream calls so they can go to a mainstream dance.
But only a few of them will ever do that.
That's right, and we found that that's truly the case.
I well remember the night I called a 150 square festival in that town. They took over the college and mobbed with people, and the after party started at 1 o'clock and never did end.
Janet.
You bet.
Janet from Colorado again. We're trying to do away with the term graduation. If you think back at high school, graduation was the end of your schooling, yep, or the end of college. And so what we're trying to present is a continuance. Mm-hmm. Now you've gotten through all these calls. Now we want you to continue with our club and be more of a part of it, not a graduation that is going to end. We lose a lot of dancers when they graduate. It's like they're done. They're going on someplace else.
For decades, it has been true that half of the people that go through a class, we talk about the good old days. When I was teaching 10, 12 square classes, the absolute rule of thumb, Ed Gilmore sent me home to count, and I started keeping records. Half of the people who graduated never danced again. And that was true 40 years ago, and still true. They took it like bridge lessons or tennis lessons. When they're done with them, they're done with them. And they'd go through class, bye-bye.
Well, this is Susan from Washington again. For the last 3 years in one of the classes I teach, I've been very fortunate to have a very wonderful president of the club. And he comes towards the end of lessons and gives a speech. And he's a former school teacher. And he takes a different slant on graduation, that when you graduated from high school or you graduated from college, you had a set of skills. But when you went to work, that's when the real learning started and how you applied it. And so that now that they were coming up to graduation, he hoped that they joined the club so that they could really learn what dancing was all about, what club membership was about, and the social things that they did, and then he'd go on to list them, so that they've had really good success with getting people to come and stay and get active.
That's a great idea. That's a really wonderful thought, and I would underline it for those who are listening to the CD when you take it home from you, to make the point that this is very much like life, and that you learn way more about the whole activity as you put it to use. On-the-job training is wonderful. Anybody else? Down back.
My name's Larry McLean. I'm from Perry, Oklahoma. I'm going to mention my wife's name is Donna McLean because this is her idea, not mine. Basically, we've never tried this, but we've tossed around the idea of having lessons like the hour before your regular dance. And you teach them for an hour. They're invited to stay at the dance to get socialized with the club. And as they continue on, like after maybe 4 lessons, they're invited to dance the first tip. And after 8, they're invited to dance the second. And you just slowly integrate them into the system.
I love the idea of innovation, and that sounds like a really nifty idea.
Actually, it reminds me of the Midnight Sundowners in Keflavik, Iceland. That's very much how the military clubs overseas used to operate. Class was 6 to 8, dance was 8 to midnight or 1 o'clock, and then we partied.
There's a club that I called for in New Hampshire that this year in their class had only one couple, but they were very dedicated couple, and they ran the class for them 1 hour before the dance started. The very dedicated couple, and they came to a lot of the dances the club was going to visit, and at their own open dances, this couple was always there. They'd help with the refreshments and join in the sociability aspect of things. And when I called for the club, they said, would you mind calling a tip that these people could dance? Absolutely not. And they did that with every guest caller that came through. So they, on the Saturday night dance, they always had one tip where this couple was able to join in, and they're still coming every time, but now they're full-fledged dancers, and 1 year has brought them in. In the process, they also became a core part of the club's social group, and whatever works. And these days, one couple's worth the effort. Okay, we're coming down the home stretch. We appreciate you all coming out to listen. We hope we've had some things to say that are useful. Your input is welcome, and we wish you well with the rest of the convention. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.